Hi there, Joel. Hi there, Troy. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, absolute pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure.
Yeah, it's a topic I like to talk about as well, but I promise everybody I'm going to let Joel and Troy do all the talking, and I'm going to be looking at questions and Q&A and all that kind of stuff. So before we get started talking about Agile estimation and capacity planning, my name's Laura Caldy. I run sales and marketing here at Applied Frameworks, and I'm excited to host this topic. Obviously, we're recording the session. We'll be sharing out the links in an email afterwards. And another nice thing that we do with that email is if you post questions in the Q&A, if we don't get the chance to fully answer them, we'll answer them in the follow-up email. So it is never a waste of time to post a question. And for all of us, it's a bit easier if you use the Q&A so we can manage whether we've answered them or not. So yeah, that's kind of the rules of the game here. And I am happy to turn it over to the team who will talk in more detail about estimation and planning.
Yep.
Joel, I think that means it has to be you next.
Oh, right. So I think we've got the slides going.
We do.
Just looking, we've got people coming in. So there's you. I think you've already said hi. Do you want to talk a little bit about webinars and such?
Well, we have a bunch of webinars that are related to this topic that are recorded and available on the appliedframeworks.com website. So if you go to the blog area, you will find both blog articles about this and also past webinar recordings. And as you dig around in there, you'll also see more about the profitable software content. And at the end of the webinar, I'll talk a little bit more about profit streams and where you can find more information about that. But for now, I think we should get going on the topic around estimation and capacity planning.
Right, and we'll also share links from Troy's stuff as well. So, so hi, I'm Joel Bancroft-Connors, the Gorilla Coach. I am a certified Scrum trainer, a certified team coach. It means I know way more about Scrum than any one human probably should. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I also have a YouTube account where I post quick and easy tips for how to use Scrum. Just for example, I've got a post up there on why should you hire a Scrum Master? A 90-second video that gives some simple math, and I'm not a math person, but it's some simple math on why you hire a Scrum Master. And Troy, can you please tell everybody who you are?
I'm Troy. I do boring math for people. Yeah, so it's I come out of the software industry. Actually, I come out of the hardware industry, moving into the software industry in the 90s. And from there, worked my way up to the level of incompetence of VP for Travelocity and lastminute.com, which some of you might sort of know and use. And there I was the only executive that seemed to care or understand that developing software might be a little bit hard and might take a little bit of time and is a little bit uncertain. And so when I moved on from there, I decided to try and teach other executives how to better understand this complex world of software development from a forecasting and a metrics perspective. So that's me. Boring.
Awesome. I'm actually really thrilled to be able to do this with Troy. I first met Troy at the original Lean Coffee in Seattle, Washington. Point of fact, Troy and I are actually both broadcasting live from Washington State today. And just I am a self-professed failed art major. Math is not my strong point. And even when Troy showed this stuff, it's like, I don't fully get it, but my God, this is just so awesome and it makes so much sense. And I've always leaned on when people want to go, well, yeah, but we need to go deeper. We need to know better. I go, okay, have you heard about Troy? And so I'm looking forward to talking through this. Kind of what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about estimation and better way to do estimation. Then I'm going to talk to you about the quick and dirty for capacity planning. And then we're going to turn it over to Troy, and Troy's going to give some demonstrations of the tools and the techniques that he's built up over the last decade and a half or more, right, Troy?
Yeah. Are you age shaming me now? But yes.
Look, when you said the 90s, I was going, yeah, okay, I worked in hardware in the 90s too.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, these have evolved over many years. I mean, every time you do a new engagement, you learn something new, and I tend to roll that in. So they're my other children.
All right. And this just goes with my metrics and estimation presentations always is, remember, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. I think that's a really important thing to remember. A lot of people think metrics is an evil thing. It's like, no, using metrics badly is evil. If you don't have them, then you don't know if you're speeding on the freeway because a speedometer is a metric. All right. So we've got this Menti, but I'm going to kind of move beyond that right now. We're still getting people coming in and such, but I want everybody to think about this. It's like, why do you estimate? And actually, if anybody wants to go and do this Menti, that's great. I'm going to ask you, Troy. I mean, again, you've got lots of experience in working with this kind of stuff. What do you hear as the #1 reasons people want to estimate?
So it's a great question, and there is no one single answer, which is why we often get wrapped around the axle in the software world, because the way the people who are going to code it hear the word estimate, and the way that people try to work out what they're going to invest in hear the word estimate can often be in conflict. And we often jump to the conclusion that it's got to be down to the day. So, I mean, we obviously estimate at the leading end of software to try and work out of all the ways we could spend our money in cash and devote our resources towards something, which is the best way of doing it. And to understand that, sometimes we want to know it's going to take 1 week, 1 month, or 1 year to do. And so part of estimation is around that decision-making process about what we're going to do, or from a pool of things that we could do. And then from the team side of it, we often sort of think about, well, so now we've got to do this big chunk of work. How much of it can we get done in this small period of time, maybe called a sprint, or maybe called a quarter, or maybe called a month? And we sort of then go down and estimate in that level of detail to try and make sure that we're not pulling too much in and swamping the team with too much work for a shorter period of time, so they sacrifice quality or they sacrifice value or something important like that. So we use estimation and capacity planning on the dev side to make sure that we continue to develop quality software, not just develop as much as we can and burn out and leave and go and work for Twitter or something like that.
All right. Thanks, Troy. So if we dig, then the next question is, okay, how do we estimate? And I mean, I think we all hear the go-to when people think about estimating, usually it's planning poker. And planning poker has been something that's been used for a long time. And I think planning poker is definitely a lot better than any of the kind of estimation that Troy and I were doing back in the 90s. I mean, I remember estimations in the 90s. It's like, ask a developer, how long is it going to take? Oh, it's going to take me 2 weeks. And the manager goes, oh, no, I know better. And it's going to take at least a month. And then he goes and he asks his other developers. And then he goes to the project manager, goes, okay, it's going to take us 3 months. And the project manager says, oh, no, I know better. It's going to take us at least 6 months. And then the entire project, which was originally only like 3 weeks worth of effort, takes 18 months. Planning poker is a lot better than those kinds of stuff. And honestly, I think it's served its time and it's no longer where we want to go. I kind of think of planning poker as more group solitaire. You've got people and they're sitting there holding cards. You put a story out on the table and it's like, okay, how big this is. The entire conversation happens in every single person's head. And there is no conversation until after people have already put cards down. And once you've put a card down, you're invested in that card. You're invested in what you think. And one of two things tends to happen. Either people anchor on that card, or if Troy puts down a 3 and I'm a junior developer and I put down a 13, then we go, okay, well, what's the reasons? And Troy goes, oh, no. It's like, well, Troy's really, really smart. So next round, I'm going to put down a 3 because that's what Troy put down. And so you get expert bias. So the reasons why planning poker don't work, the top reasons are Hofstadter's law. Hofstadter's law basically says that you're always going to underestimate the amount of work that it's going to take, even when you take Hofstadter's law into account. Optimism bias is, oh, come on, it can't be that hard. Planning fallacy is, oh, we've done this before in the past. we've got this. We've figured this out. And then finally, basically, as human beings, we don't do time well. We do not do time well. Anything over about 4 hours, and we're not good at estimating. If you ask me how long it's going to take me to clean my bathroom, which is up over there, I'm going to say maybe about 30 minutes. But I got a garage over here. It is a 4-car garage. There are no cars in it. If you ask me how long it's going to take to clean that, I have no idea. These are reasons why planning poker doesn't work well. So the question is, there's got to be a better way, right? There is. It's actually been around for a long time. I listened to an interview just last week from one of the signers of the Agile Manifesto, who was a founder in XP, and I'm blanking on his name, and he was talking about doing early versions of this in the early 2000s. The idea is based around a principle that Luke Hohmann wrote about in his book, Innovation Games, and it's called 20/20 Vision. And 20/20 Vision uses the principle of going to the eye doctor. When you go to an eye doctor, they don't go, okay, here's 20 lenses. Which lens is the easiest one to see through? They go, here's a lens. Is this lens more or less clear than this lens? And so you're always doing these binary judgments against a baseline reference. What I want to do is I'm going to change my share screen. We're going to go over to Miro. I'm going to show you really quickly the principle of how this works. And of course, I change my share screen and I immediately lose my Zoom screen. There they are. They all got moved behind the Q&A panel. So with 20/20, again, you start with that reference. You got your right eye, and now you're comparing the left eye against the right eye. So we're going to start with a piece of fruit, an apple. And the question is, how long does it take to prepare this apple so that you can serve it? And then you're going to be comparing. And so we now have a pineapple, and we go, okay, is a pineapple more or less effort than an apple? Now, this one's pretty easy. We go, yeah, that's definitely more effort. Then we've got a cherry, and we go, is a cherry more or less effort? That one's pretty easy. Then we start to get a little bit, okay, we've got a peach. And this is where then you maybe start to have conversations. And a really good conversation is, okay, well, who's the customer? Well, in this case, the customer are preschool students, and this is for snack time. Oh, okay. Well, preschool students, you can't just hand them an apple and say, here, eat the apple. You've got to cut the apple up. You got to take the seeds out, and then you serve it. Whereas a peach, you can basically just, you can partially slice the peach, twist it, and you've got 2 halves you can hand it to 2 kids. So a cherry is easier to prepare and consume to prepare for consumption than an apple. And then we get to an orange. Okay, an orange. Again, preschool students. Not only do you have to peel the orange, you've got to segment, and you've got to take out all that white stuff, because if you don't, guaranteed they're going to start throwing it across the table. So we go, okay, an orange is more effort than an apple. And so as you can see, in a real quick round robin conversation with the team, they've quickly gone from easiest to prepare to most complicated to prepare. Cool thing about this technique is you can also use this for value. You can go, okay, great. We could use this same 20/20 technique to say what's most valuable. Now, interesting thing is if you're dealing with preschoolers, there's your value chain. The cherry is the most valuable. Kids love cherries, and pineapples, they're weird, they look funny, they're not so sure about it. And only after you do this, do you do something like assigning, I want to just do this. Only after you've gotten it from least effort to most effort, do you do something like assigning points. We go, okay, we agree that cherry is the smallest. So we're going to arbitrarily call it 1 point. There's no time associated with it. It's just, it is the smallest, therefore it's 1 point. Then we go, we know, the peach is 2 point. However, when we start to think about it, an apple and a peach are almost the same amount of effort. There's not much more effort between slicing a peach and slicing up an apple. So both of these are 2. The orange is a little bit more complicated. And then we go, you know what, not only is a pineapple more effort than an orange, it's a lot more effort. So it's an 8 point, and we have no 5 point stories right now. Again, you can do the same thing with value and go, pineapple is the least valuable thing here. Oranges, though, are a lot less valuable. Apples are a little bit more value. Kids really like peaches because they're sweet. And of course, kids really, really like cherries. In fact, wow, not only do they like cherry, they like cherries so much that it's a 13. And so you can see a cherry is obviously one of the first things we want to build. It's got an effort of 1 and a value of 13. Kind of no brainer there. So this is simple relative estimation, which you can use both for sizing and for valuing. Troy, any thoughts on this as I switch back to the slide deck?
No, I think this covers it all, and it's sometimes you may not have a full, complete vision of the data. Like you may never have cut a pineapple up before, so hence you still have 10 fingers. But you know, this sort of accounts for that, because you can know that even though we haven't done it, it's got some particular challenges to cutting it that other fruit doesn't have. So, and it's low value, so maybe we won't do it now because it's risky and hard and unknown. So different things that we're estimating, you don't have to have complete information to make this work. You can, you will guess better using your 2020 technique than you will guess in having to quantify a number.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I'm going to do, let me make sure I put this to everyone, and this will be included in the slide deck. I'm posting a link in chat. This is actually from a Miro template that I've created and is available in the Miroverse, so you can download this and share it with your teams. I'm a super big fan of Miro. No, I'm not sponsored by Miro. So this is an example of doing this exercise that I teach in my classes all the time. And as you can see here, we go from grape to durian. And again, durian, it's like people don't even know what durian is, so it's way out there in the complexity. And as you can see, as you go through, then you start to say, oh, well, you know what? The orange, the apple, and the peach, they're all roughly the same amount of effort. And the pineapple and the coconut are roughly the same amount of effort. So you can use this technique to really quickly go, okay, great. How much effort is there in this? And again, you can also use this the 2020 technique for deciding value. Bring your stakeholders in, have a conversation. When you have multiple stakeholders going, oh, no, this is my thing, get them all in a room and go, okay, great. Hash it out, have a conversation. And you kind of find that by them getting together and having a conversation, they actually will quite often recognize, oh, you know what, Troy's thing is actually a little bit more important than my thing. So let's go ahead and give his more value. All right. That said, no matter how good your estimates are, it won't all get done. I mean, Troy, you've worked in enough projects over the years. Did you ever get to the point where there was nothing left to do?
No. No, and I mean, it's sort of, you know, if we're sort of planning based on averages, then we're almost planning intentionally for half of it to not get done. And that sort of pretty much was what bears out in most planning sessions, most sort of industry sort of estimation and forecasting is about half of what you thought you could get done, you get done.
Yeah. And even if your product owners are practicing the number one rule that Heinrich Niebuhr gives about being a good product owner of practice saying no, you're still always going to have more work than you can get done. And so you have to start making good conversations about, okay, great. Well, what work are we going to get done? This whole idea of, well, those are all priority zero. They all have to get done. It's like, okay, that's great. The math says we can't get it all done. And even if you add more people, you're not going to get it all done. So what is it that what are we going to do first? So forecasting and capacity planning, basically to be able to go, how much can you do? A lot of times you've got to also be able to forecast. So there always is going to be more work. Prioritizing does help because then you know that you're working on the most important things first. The date will almost never change. This is something I'm a huge passionate about. And it's one of those kind of mindset shifts that some people in Agile have problems with is the date's never going to change. Agile doesn't change that. If you have to ship in time to be able to make the shipping date to get product on the loading dock for Best Buy, you can't go, oh, well, we need 2 more sprints. The date's never going to change. Quality is should never change. Therefore, the only lever you have left is, what are you going to build? And so, okay, great. We have to be done by June 18th, no matter what. You have to start going, okay, what can we have done by June 18th? And let's prioritize the things that are most important. So being able to answer how much can we do is vital. Let me pop back over to the Miro board, and I want to show you a technique that I have been using. If I can find my Miro board. There we go. So the idea is a story reference board. And here, the most important thing is, do you have work that you've already done? If you don't have work that you've already done, you at least have work that you have estimated. So maybe you've used the relative estimation technique and you've estimated 10 or 12 big items. You notice I call this reference work over here. The idea here is quite often you're going to be using this capacity planning at larger pieces of work, features or epics, depending on what kind of implementation of Agile you're using. The idea here is, imagine that this reference board, the reference work is stuff we've already done. We have prepared cherries many times. We know down pat that there are 1 points. We have prepared durians and jackfruits, and we know they're a heck of a lot of effort. And even though we've gotten better at them, there's a certain point of diminishing return. We're never going to get more effective at durian. And the idea here is, okay, great. We know how much work we've done. How much effort this past work we've done is. And here I really recommend it's actually don't just look at past work, go back and look at it again. Go back and say, hey, 3 months ago, we built this feature. We said it was a 5-point feature then. Do we still think it was a 5-point, or was it more or less effort? And so you're going to maybe re-estimate stuff. And then it allows you to easily go, here's a new piece of work. And you literally just start at the left and you go, is a persimmon misspelled? Yes, a persimmon is misspelled. Is a persimmon roughly the same amount of effort as a cherry and a grape? No. Apricot and a kumquat? No. Banana? Maybe, because you can kind of just peel it and eat it. But again, preschool students, so we need to cut it up. So we're going to put it about here. Pomegranate. Wow, pomegranate is a whole lot of effort, and it's really messy. There's a lot of risk involved in serving pomegranates to preschoolers. A papaya, you know what? Papaya is pretty simple here. Maybe we'll put it about a banana and then a mangosteen. If you don't know what a mangosteen is, look it up. But pretty hard to prepare, and probably not something you want to serve, because if we look at value, there's not going to be a high value for it. As you can see, though, it allows you to really quickly estimate new work based off of past work. Now, the secret here is then you look back at your past releases and imagine that these reference works, we're going to call these arbitrarily, and we're going to call these feature points instead of story points, feature points. And imagine these are all large chunks of work. We're going to build a new calendaring app. We're going to build a new mapping app. And we estimated these in feature points. Then we go back and we look at our last, preferably at least our last 3 historical feature releases. These are not necessarily going to be sprints. Like if you were using in SAFe, let's look at our last 3 PIs. And let's look at how many feature points we delivered in each PI. And so maybe you delivered 25 feature points, and then you delivered 30 feature points, and then you had a really bad PI and you delivered 15 feature points. And then if we go, okay, that's over the last 3 releases, and it's like 25 plus 30 plus 15. Yes, I'm using a calculator. I did say I was an art major. So we end up with, on average, we can deliver 23 feature points per release. We've got the stuff estimated here, and we can go, okay, great, 23 feature points. This is 13 plus 8, that's 21. That's 24, that's 28. So we're only going to be able to deliver 2 or 3 of these items based on our current capacity. So that's using historical reference, a story reference board, and then looking also at your historical velocity in a good way to go, how much effort do we think we can do? Thoughts on this technique, Troy?
No, I think you covered it well. I mean, the important message or factor that came out of this was that you're not going to get one of them. It's the first thing you're not going to get, which is the valuable thing to understand, because from knowing that you're not going to get that, the consequences of that can be assessed, and you might be able to trim the other features down to get a bit of all four rather than just missing one completely. So it's, often I find that forecasting estimation is about what can get done. I think if you reverse the question around and sort of saying, what is the first thing we're unlikely to get, you tend to be able to work with the business on alternative approaches to get a little bit more of what you want. So I look at this from the most interesting thing to learn is the first thing you're not going to get, not the three things you are going to get.
I love that mindset. I don't think I've ever really thought of it quite that way, of the, let's start with what you're not going to get, and are you okay with that? And if not, what are we going to do about that?
Well, that's eventually what happens anyway, right? I mean, as you get closer to near the end of it, the discussions turn to, OMG, we're not going to get sort of that new song from Britney. Like I don't know sort of what there is there and what the cool kids would say as a metaphor, but there's the fact is that the way software tends to work in constraints, and especially the tension between development and business, is that why didn't you tell me earlier that I wasn't going to get this? And what forecasting and capacity planning gets you, even if it doesn't get you a perfectly accurate result, it gets you an earlier conversation when you're not under the stress of failure.
Absolutely. And I used this technique a few years ago when I worked but pre-COVID, I worked for the BMW connected car group in Chicago, and it actually did lead to whole conversations, which included the, look, this is just not good enough. We need to be able to deliver more in a quarter. What do we need to do? And then that went into whole series of maths of just how many teams do we have to add to be able to actually radically improve our capacity in the next 2 months. And there we stepped into whole mythical man month land, and the fact that they had 2 teams, and a whole nother podcast for another day is they realized that they would have to add 6 more teams to the 2 teams they had in order to increase their capacity by 50%, because of the fact that it would take so long for teams to come up to speed and all of that. All right. One thing I will promise to everybody is what I just did of that, the capacity stuff and talking about the feature points on the Miro board. I will make sure to drop that slide in here. I forgot to put an example of that slide here in the deck, so you'll have it for reference when we send out the deck. At this point, though, while I really love doing story reference boards and it's really easy to do, it is still ultimately it is still based on the human gut and the human brain and such. And we're fallible. I mean, just like we're not good at estimating time, we're not good at doing hard math problems, and some of us even with a calculator. And so what I want to do at this point is literally, I want to invite Troy to come forward and ChatGPT. I want to invite Troy to come forward. I'm going to stop sharing. Troy doesn't have slides. He's actually just going to show you the tools that he's developed, that he is using with people today to help them to do better estimation, help them to answer that question, how much can we do in X amount of time? So let me stop sharing. And I think, Troy, you should be able to share, no problem. And you're on mute again.
That was intentional.
Okay.
It was not. If you believe that, you believe anything. So that's why I'm a consultant, right? I can make an excuse for anything. I've got a top drawer of tools and articles and stuff I've written over many sort of years, and the links will be put in the chat window. But they come about because I find myself constantly having to introduce people to just how hard this stuff may well be to get accurate, right? Because, I mean, if you think of how long it's going to take you to get to the airport, you know the distance, and you know roughly sort of when your flight takes off, but you're actually forecasting not when the flight takes off. You're forecasting when you need to leave home. And that is the true value of sort of forecasting and estimating. It's about knowing when to start something, not knowing when something's finished, because you can get anything finished by any date you want if you start early enough. So we don't have a forecasting the finishing date problem. We have a forecasting the start date problem. And we tend to, where do we spend all of our time? We spend all of our time estimating the done date. Well, you know, I think that every other field that has managed to delve into forecasting with uncertainty works out when you need to be somewhere, when you need to arrive somewhere, and then works backwards about whether you're likely to make that or not. So if you look at Google Maps, for instance, you know, as you're driving, it's constantly updating the time you're going to arrive. But you can also set it'll tell you well, I mean, Google being sort of purveyors of private data, they know in your inbox sort of when your flight's going to take off. So it says, you haven't left home yet, you loser, you should leave. And that's what they've done is, and I find that from an executive sort of world, when we sort of try and put pressure onto teams and people to finish something by a certain date, we don't equally put pressure on ourselves for making sure we allow teams to start at a certain date. So there's one aspect of it. Secondly is, I'm going to say this word, Monte Carlo forecasting. So I have an article for that here, which has a bit of a God, it even looks geeky now. This is in my math period. I've grown up since then. But, you know, traditionally what we do in Agile is we just do these burn down charts, right? We work out that we need 25 points of work done, and we roughly deliver, you know, maybe 4 points on average. This is my team's, not Joel's. Notice he's in the 10s, I'm in the 4s, right? It's a straight sort of division operator of the total amount of work. So if the total amount of work goes up, so does how many sprints it takes to deliver that work. And this is all perfectly well and good and fine and logical, as long as 35 is an exact number and 5 is an exact number. So we need perfect estimates for the total work we want to do and the pace that we normally deliver that work. You can't, that's not logical, right? We know that there's variability, that points are going to be added and taken away as we sort of refine scope. And we know that the team's velocity isn't exactly 5. So we throw in this thing called an average. And the moment we do that, remember, at an average, roughly half of the sprints get more than that, and half of the sprints get less than that. So the probability of delivering in 7 sprints using the typical burn down charts is 50%. You have a coin toss chance of your work being late or being on time. And in many fields, some of them medical, that's not a good enough margin of error. You know, you got a 50% chance of surviving surgery isn't something that sort of fills you with confidence and fear. You probably would be a bit more nervous than you need to be, as to we should when we're making multi-million-dollar investments in software projects. So all we do is we give ourselves the ability to do mathematics with uncertain numbers. So rather than the fixed 25 points, we say between 20 and 30 points. And rather than delivery pace between 1 and 5 points, we being exactly sort of 1 or 5 points or 3 points, we can sort of say delivery pace varies somewhere between 1 and 5 points or stories per sprint. Do the math that you want. And then we hypothetically do a burn down, starting off at a random number between the total work range, and then decrementing every hypothetical sprint by a random number between 1 and 5. And what you do, and remember, this is what invented weapons of mass destruction, you know, nuclear weapons. They needed to find a way to understand uncertainty during that sort of period of the Manhattan Project, to understand how much lead shielding was necessary to not sort of to make the nuclear weapons safe to transport. there's no fixed number of the way sort of uranium decays. It has a rate, but that varies. And the same thing about sort of absorption in different materials. So what they did there is the same thing as we're doing here. Rather than hypothetical burn downs of software projects, they sort of did the amount of protons and electrons, neutrons that exited sort of a lead shielding. But the point is, all this whole big convoluted term called Monte Carlo forecasting or probabilistic forecasting is a way of exploring and doing mathematics on ranges of numbers. So all this is solving is 20 to 30 divided by 1 to 5. Nothing more complex than that. It's if you say it doesn't work, it's like saying the addition operator or the division operator don't work. It's just a mathematical process. Well, what it gives us is, unfortunately, it gives us, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, it sort of says the value could be, you could be finished it in 5 sprints, or you can be finished it in 15 sprints. Great way to get fired. Because people love nothing more than to sort of say sometime in 2023 or 2027, we don't know which yet. And so although what Monte Carlo allows us to do is explore the possibilities of what could happen given uncertainty in our world, it leaves us unsatisfied with the understanding of what we've got. But this is a gold mine, because what we can do is we can turn that into a number. Remember I said the typical burn down gives you a 50% chance of forecasting. So it might be above 9 weeks, or it might be below 9 weeks with a 50% chance. What we can do now that we have a set of results is we can drag the probability slider up and sort of say 95% certain will be finished in 12 weeks or less. So by incorporating uncertainty into the mathematical operation, what it allows us to do is delve into the probabilities that something's going to happen on or before a certain date. And if you're one of those pointy head boss executives which want to get a bit more certainty in understanding when things are going to be done, this is a useful tool. But if you go and pick up Joel's calculator right now, it doesn't have a 1 to 5 divided by, a 25 to 35 divided by 1 to 5. It doesn't have that button. And it seems like my head's exploding. So part of what I sort of did there in the early days there was I created a couple of spreadsheets which just do this for you. And there's no code in these spreadsheets. They're plain old spreadsheets. Yep. And it does the same thing, 20 to 25 estimate. Well, roughly we're going to get between 1 and 10 things done per sprint, most likely 3, and it will convert that into a how many weeks or how many sprints that you want to you're likely to deliver in. And you can read off the likelihood here, 85% certainty is going to take 8 sprints. So you give yourself extra margin for error by accurately portraying the uncertainty that exists in your project and your product. And that's sort of what this does. But you can go one step further. Rather than just estimating the pace that you're doing, you can come in here and you can put actual historical velocities or samples, as Joel said, the last 3 or 4 sort of sprints. You can put those in instead of your estimates. And then you can sort of drop down here and just sort of say, go and use the historical data instead. And what the historical data shows is that we're moving a bit slower than what we originally estimated we were going to be moving. Very valuable to know while you can still do something about it. And that's the point I want to make, that these forecasts are best done early and continuously, not just done early, come up with a date, and then sort of say, phew, thank God that's done. But I don't want you to use this spreadsheet. So this sort of mimics the way we're currently working. I want you to think about forecasting in the way that sort of Joel sort of was saying there before, is that pick a target date, come up with a set of features, particularly focus on whether we really understand this work or we don't understand this work, and then discuss the first feature that you're not going to get with your business owners. So focus on what you're not going to get, and then what they might sort of say, well, feature 3 is going to miss. OMG, we need feature 3. And then you're sort of saying, well, which feature would you like to sacrifice? Feature 1 or feature 2? Because we can start feature 3 and make sure you absolutely get that, but we can't do that and get all 3. So what you've done now is you've guaranteed that you get feature 3, but you've put feature 1 and 2 at risk. And then you might say, do we need all of feature 3? And they sort of say, well, no, not really. We just need the first sort of 5 and 8 stories or points in that. Well, that changes the picture dramatically. So what we're trying to do in forecasting is never say no. We're trying to provide options to getting more yeses earlier before it becomes a tragedy. And yeah, with that, I guess if you had to pick, if I had to leave you with one takeaway of what blows up forecasts, it's not the story point estimates. It's never the story point estimates. It's that the team doesn't get to focus on this work. They only 50% of this work. That changes what you're not going to get quite dramatically. It's that this start date is something that we invented on paper. Any start date that is the beginning of a month or a quarter is BS by default. All right, because you do not know that the team immediately rolls off a prior piece of work onto this new piece of work exactly on that start date. So start date and the team focus on the work are the two things I think you need to pay attention to more than your estimates of size of points. Because what you will find, and you can do your own experiments on this, a 10% change in, or even a 50% change in these points does not have the same impact as a 50% change on the team focus of the work or the start date. They have a much less impact than it, but we make an art form of spending time where it's not well spent. All right, so with that, I know we're happy to take questions, and handing back over to you.
Yeah,
Joel.
thanks, Troy. So I think a couple of things I want to call out from what Troy shared. First off is on Troy's little thing about the percentage of the team capacity. You'll notice it didn't have anything above 100%. I made a post about this recently on LinkedIn. It's a bad dad joke I have. It's what do you call a team that's at 100? What do you call a freeway that's at 100% capacity?
Los Angeles?
A parking lot. Yes, Los Angeles. And what do you call a freeway that is at 150% capacity? A traffic accident. You can't say, oh, the team's going to work at 120%. No, you can't. There is no 120%. That doesn't exist. The one other question I had for you, Troy, is just, so we talk about the historical data. As I understand it, if they want to go and move their historical data up on even another notch, move beyond estimates and then look at historical cycle time. What is the cycle time that it took to complete past stories, correct? And that'll get them even more accuracy?
Well, not more accuracy, but it answers a slightly different question.
Okay.
I mean, the idea of cycle time really is that if you haven't started by a certain period of time, historically, things have taken longer than this to do. So it's again, out of the amount of time you travel to the airport or you commute to work when we used to do such things, you roughly knew, depending on the first meeting you had when you left home, to give yourself sort of some extra leeway of getting through traffic and getting through weather disruptions and accidents and so forth. But you can't avoid all accidents. Sometimes they happen and it's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes they close bridges, sometimes they close freeways. So, what cycle time gives you is the ability to sort of say, this piece of work I need to start on or before. What Monte Carlo forecasting gives you is the ability to sort of say, out of all these things I've got to do, I should get many of these, but I don't know which ones yet. So cycle time gets you down to an item level. and forecasting gets you keeps you at that aggregate level of this is the size bucket I can deliver in this period of time. Choose wisely, grasshopper. And we need to keep the two perspectives in mind. So not more accurate, just more granular.
All right, good clarification there. So folks, do you have any questions for myself or Troy about estimation, forecasting, capacity planning? I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A. How can people find out more about what you do? I know you put some stuff into chat, Troy, but I know you teach workshops on this on a regular basis, right?
Yeah, I mean there's some public workshops you can do. This stuff tends to be a bit more of I only get called in when there's a crisis, to be honest. Yeah, I get called in. We're terrible at estimating and forecasting, and it turns out that of course they were set up to fail before they begin. So yeah, I tend to do a lot of internal workshops on forecasting, but it turns out never to be the teams. It always turns out to be the types of questions that they're being asked are unreasonable, because it varies, right? I mean, if all this historical data is well and good, as long as you've done similar work before. If you change developer frameworks, or you say Elon Musk takes over your company, it doesn't matter what your prior velocity was when 50% of your staff has gone bye-bye, right? It doesn't matter how many people you could do on their chat system or their live system when the team which used to deliver that is now gone, right? So we need to understand when we throw data away and when we destroy the system's ability to be able to be forecasted. So I tend to help organizations understand why it doesn't matter what history says they could do, they can no longer do. But more of a system approach to understanding probability.
All right, absolutely.
Awesome. I do have one comment I was hoping to make that I just appreciate both of you kind of bringing this to light, is incorporating the conversation around value and what won't be done, as well as what can be done and what the team can deliver. And I think, when you're thinking about estimation, it sounds like it's a one-dimensional conversation, but it's not. It's multi-dimensional, and time and value and market needs and stakeholder requirements and the fact that things change, right, means that when you're looking at it from a multi-dimensional conversation with more actors involved, you end up getting a better result at the end, which ultimately what we all want to do is deliver high quality solutions that have a lot of value to our customers. So I appreciate what you were getting at, which is it's a multi-dimensional effort, and there's a lot of benefit that comes out of it from doing it well.
We like to make out as if there's a simple answer to these problems, and it's just not, right? I mean, these are so complex. No matter how many icons you put on an A0 diagram in your framework, it's a complex world we need to live in. Mm-hmm. So stop looking for simple answers to these problems.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Troy. So if you're deep into this and you're trying to figure out how to figure out where are you going, how long is it going to take you to get there and everything, call Troy. That's what he does, especially. If you're trying to set stuff up to get going from the beginning for success, one of the things I would like to recommend is consider coming to one of my Certified Scrum Master or Certified Product Owner workshops. One of the things that I really pride myself on is, let's start with why. Why does this stuff work, so that you can set it up the right place? If people just say, go do a daily Scrum, and you don't know why, you're going to get into the problems that are going to make it so that you have to call Troy 6 months from now. Come to one of my classes. Hopefully you can avoid having to call Troy in a panic. Instead, call Troy because you just want to get better. Laura, can you really quickly connect this also then up to software profit streams, and why should we care about software profit streams?
Well, I think what people are thinking about, again, building high quality solutions for customers is a multi-dimensional, multidisciplinary effort. And so I think what you're talking about is a very collaborative approach to building in quality and building in value. And one of the things that we're adding to the conversation from Applied Frameworks is, how do we build in profitability? So thinking about the value stream as a profit stream makes a lot of sense for companies that are building software-enabled solutions that end up in the hands of customers who pay money for them. So thinking about designing in profitability, again, is a systems thinking exercise, because it impacts architecture, it impacts pricing and licensing and customer ROI and solution ROI. And so Applied Frameworks has added into the conversation a book called Software Profit Streams, written by Jason Tanner and Luke Homan. And we find that people who love the certified Scrum Product Owner course will evolve into wanting to think about what's the profit system that I'm building in my solution. And so we have training courses and blog posts and webinars that talk about profit streams. So hopefully that wasn't too long of an explanation, but I think it gets at what we all care deeply about, which is, let's understand the system that we're impacting. There are no black and white, simple kind of answers to things when we're building systems for customers. And if we keep that in mind and use the tools that help us reason about what we're building, I think we end up delivering higher quality solutions to our customers.
And so, absolutely. What I want to do is I want to leave you with 3 quotes to tie this all together. The first is from Simon Sinek, the author of Start With Why and several other great books. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The next is from Atif, and I'm realizing that when I posted this, I got missed his last name. I think it's Atif Rafiq. He's the author of a book called Decision Sprint, multiple time chief digital officer. And he talks about the days of blank check innovation are over. You can't just build for innovation's sake. And then lastly, Luke Homan, author of Software Profit Streams. It's no longer enough to deliver value. You have to deliver profit. So thank you very much. I'm Joel Bancroft-Connors, the Gorilla Coach. Troy, thank you so very much. And Laura, thank you to Applied Frameworks for hosting us such a wonderful webinar.
Appreciate you both. And thanks everyone for joining.
Take care, everyone. Thank you again, Troy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right.
Thanks a lot, Troy.
Thanks, mate. Bye-bye.